Nic Walsh, this is your life. No, I didn't mean to say that. I'm so sorry. Nic, I'm really pleased that you've agreed to this process.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk. It's shutting me up. That's the challenge.
Yeah, well, that's why one of the many reasons I've asked you to come on, because you're very good at storytelling. No pressure. You were about to launch into some lyrics of what was it?
Colonel Bogey?
Colonel Bogey. Are they repeatable? Are they recordable for posterity?
Not.
Absolutely not. Good.
They may or may not have been biologically correct, but they certainly weren't complimentary to the high command of the Nazi regime.
Well, let's leave it there then, because in the future, well, one of the things I said to Kira was it'd be really nice for you to, no doubt, in the future have a recorder, because we keep photograph albums, don't we? And we keep well, I don't anymore, actually. It's all electronic, isn't it? But
you just hope that in future generations the media will not be so different, that your images will be unreachable.
Yes, downloadable in this case. Because we don't. Anyway, Nic, thank you very much for joining. Now, actually, this is quite apposite, isn't it? Because you have recently been elevated, have you not?
Indeed. Well, I think I didn't move fast enough in the direction. But yes, I have assumed the chair of Second Thoughts.
Again, is it not your second term?
Well done. Yes, indeed. I did serve for a couple of years, a decade or even maybe 2 decades ago. I agreed to be deputy in order to ease the sort of passage from Ian to his successor, and then his successor to whoever, but whoever turned out to be me anyway. So here I am.
And Georgie Wood is your deputy now, isn't she?
Right, which is good, because here's somebody of a totally different generation. Hopefully will find her feet and be able to take over the chair, or certainly take over more responsibilities.
Yeah, it's great, actually, isn't it? I don't know. One doesn't want to repeat and record Georgie's age. I don't even know it. But of course, as you say, let's just say she's younger than you and me.
Yeah, by quite a margin. No offense.
Graham. And it's probably, let me scratch my head and think, she's probably the youngest office holder of that, well, youngest deputy / chair ever.
I would think that is almost certainly true.
Almost certain, isn't it? Ian would know. But anyway, that is great, because it's good having you and Georgie there, isn't it? Because experience, and well, I mean, she's very experienced, isn't she? But so are you. Anyway, you're the subject of today. Maybe I'll see if I can get Georgie to record one of these, and we can talk about that. But so now, what has induced you to step up to the plate again?
Well, I've been proud to be a member of Second Thoughts ever since I first discovered it, and I realized there was a vacuum, and I thought, well, okay, I will give it another shot. I didn't particularly enjoy my first term of office for a variety of reasons. We won't go there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping for a slightly less troubled ride this time. But we are in difficult times, and trying to get the group back into production to do what we're set up to do, just to make theatre. That's quite a challenge, but one that I think we all want to undertake and prove the pessimists wrong. I think theatre is one activity that is pretty well unstoppable for a variety of reasons.
Yes, I agree, and so is Second Thoughts, actually. So Second Thoughts. In your time in theatre, well, let's. I don't want you to reveal your age necessarily, but when at all, because you do look, you're a lot younger than me, as indeed does pretty much anybody, actually. But anyway, at what age did you start?
Well, I got involved when I was a child because my father was a country vicar and my mother, as the dutiful vicar's wife, was drawn into organizing all sorts of things, including various pageants, parades, entertainments, and so on. So it was a natural sort of step for me to get involved. Then at school, I aspired to acting. Very inspirational couple of directors I worked with on the school staff. So I arrived at university all, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, going to conquer the world, and realized that actually there were a hell of a lot, far more talented actors at that particular university. If I say Oxford, you'll understand how competitive it was. So I thought, I'm never going to make it as an actor, but I sense there's a lack of technical staff, particularly production management staff. So I specialized in that. I did a bit of lighting, a bit of stage management, a bit of set construction, production management. Being reasonably numerate, despite being a classicist, was an advantage. So that's sort of how it sort of took over my younger years. And then when I finally got to take my degree, just about, well, if I tell you that as well as being a...
Oh no, you're breaking up a bit. Nic is breaking up a little bit, but
and the week before my finals,
I'm just going to interrupt for a bit, Nic. Sorry to interrupt. Just say that you froze a bit there, so I can cut that out if I just do another hand thing.
It says my internet connection is unstable.
Yes, they tend to be. It's weird, isn't it? It happens at strange times of the day. Just go back to so if I say so you went you were at university. What was theatre like at university for you, Nic?
Well, I arrived all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking, well, I made it big at school, not realizing that big fish, little pond inverts when you get to university. And there are a lot of very, very talented actors and other talents around, a generation that's gone on to conquer not just theatre, but television as well. And very rapidly came to the conclusion that actually I was never going to make it. But I spotted a gap in the market, which was on the technical side. So I did a bit of stage lighting, a bit of set construction, bit of production management. The one thing I didn't do was wardrobe. And then I got involved with the stage crew, the paid professional stage crew at the Oxford Playhouse, and had some lovely times there. One or two good stories that come out of it, but hey, we'll come back to those if we have time.
Oh, well, let's get into them now.
Okay.
In case your internet becomes unstable.
Okay, well, we don't want instability.
No.
The Oxford Playhouse at that time had just been refurbished with a 4-stage lift that at its height became an extension of the acting area. At its bottom point became an orchestra pit, and halfway between was the front 3 rows of the stalls. Now, at that stage, Frank Hawser and Meadow Players were the resident company. Anybody who was in Oxford during the 50s, 60s, or early 70s will recognize those names. And they had a show on stage, but they also wanted to rehearse their next show. So they decided that rather than pay the crew to strike the standing set to give them space to rehearse, they would use the 4-stage. Yeah, no problem at all. But the 4-stage was actually in its middle position as the front 3 rows of the stalls, with seats on it and carpet. So at 9 o'clock every morning, Monday to Saturday, I used to come in with 2 others, and we would strike the seats back and lift. It was on a lifting mechanism, lift the 4-stage up to a full stage level, so it was ready for rehearsal. And then at 5 o'clock every evening, we would return and we would reverse the process. And back it would go, the seats would go back on, and we would depart. Now, in the course of 2 weeks, we got pretty damn slick about that. And I think 12 minutes was our record to do the changeover. And this dates it rather, because the technical manager, lovely man, he had forgotten more than I have ever learnt about the technical side of theatre. He just stood to one side as we arrived and said, "Hey, here come the train robbers."
That does date it a bit, yeah.
A bit, but it was good. It was good.
Why did they call you the train robbers?
What?
Why did they call you the train robbers?
Because there had just been a famous robbery at, was it Biggleswade or Linslade or something, that an armed gang had held up an express train with lots of cash in it and made off with the loot. And it was one of the phrases of the moment, the great train robbery.
Oh, right. Not because you looked like Ronnie Biggs or anything. Or
No. It was the speed and ease with which we took our money and ran.
The alacrity of your smash and grab raid.
Student grants weren't enough even in those days.
Actually, we should remember with sadness, of course, somebody did die in that train
Yes,
robbery. So I'm making
no.
I'm making light of it, I can imagine that. So you're cutting a very kind of Ealing comedy dash there in your description, Nick.
Yes.
I'm sure you were very much more slick than that.
Professional, but of course, health and safety was not yet codified.
Wasn't it?
If we cut corners, nobody was there to wag a finger at us. But I learned a heck of a lot because I worked on all aspects of staging. I was up in the flies. I was up in the roof doing follow spots. You name it, I did it.
Do you think that, just on a sidebar note to that, because that's an era before, I suspect, before risk assessments as such, do you think there were many more accidents then than now, or perhaps we didn't hear about them in those days so much?
Well, the biggest single change that I've seen, although I haven't worked with the latter stages, is automation. Yeah. In other words, machinery that is doing the heavy lifting.
Yes.
When I was there, we had a certain number of counterweight bars where the weight of the scenery was counterbalanced with a number of removable iron weights, so that to make the scenery come in on cue was actually a one-handed job because it was so neatly balanced. But there were still certain flying bars that were on hemp sets. In other words, 3 ropes, long, middle, short. And you just had to build up some muscle and lift that and do it sort of hand over hand. And it was possible, of course, to lose the grip. But they tended to be the bars that weren't used during a show. So instead, this will amuse you, they tended in the playhouse in those days to be used for the lighting rig. Now, if you think about it, hemp, no counterweight, and the heavy weight of lighting equipment, not a good mix.
Not a good mix.
And the fly gallery would suddenly become awfully deserted when the elects shouted up they wanted a bar moving. But there's something about the view from the fly gallery. The top bar is almost exactly the same height as would be a bar counter in a pub. So you stand with one elbow looking down, watching the show. And it's a lovely viewpoint. Particularly if it's a period costume with lots of ladies, you get the drift.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank goodness my audience is very small and very broad-minded. So yes. And you were there. How long were you at the Playhouse then? It was a beautiful theatre, isn't it? I've only been to it a few times, but really lovely.
I worked backstage there on and off for about 3 years,
Okay.
up to and including, I have to say, the week before my finals.
Ah,
And there's a pub right at the stage door called the Gloucester Arms, which used, in those days, it wasn't frowned upon to drink while you were engaged gainfully on stage work.
good.
And
Good.
I had a break between flying cues, so I nipped into the Gloucester Arms, Glock. Yeah. And as I was just lifting the glass to my lips, the door opened and in walked my tutor.
Oh, gosh.
Mercifully, I was on the hinge side of the door. So I downed the pint, put the glass back, and was out before the door shut.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness.
Yes.
Swift
I didn't get a
athleticism.
degree, but I had a hell of a good time at Oxford.
Yes, you must have done. So you were working part-time at the theatre while you were studying?
I was working part-time. I was nominally studying, yes.
It's the other way around then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
What a wonderful thing to do, because students have all kinds of jobs, don't they? There's bar staff, but to actually work in a place you loved being in, it must have been fantastic.
Well, I went away to teach, me, for a couple of years, and then I heard that there was a vacancy on the administrative side of the Playhouse, and I got invited to interview and got the job. Now, in those days, the Playhouse was actually run by the university, and it had established effectively two apprenticeships, one backstage on the technical side, one front of house on the administrative side. So I learnt theatre management from an amazing, terrifying woman who had trained with Marks and Spencer's, then gone into theatre, worked with H.M. Tennant, the big West End producers, and all sorts of things. Oh, and she'd worked with Benjamin Britten with, yes, exactly, an English opera group and all of that. So she had forgotten more than I would ever learn. And I did. I learned a hell of a lot. But most of all, she was prepared to challenge me. And I'd only been a couple of months in the job and was so green it wasn't true. And she decided she was going away for the weekend. And she broke this to me on, I think, of the Thursday. She was going on the Friday. And she said, "You'll be okay. If something arises, take a decision. I don't care what it is, but I will back you. Just take a decision." Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Of course, nothing did happen and no decisions were required, but it was a morale boost.
Must have been, mustn't it? I mean, that's a hecker. How old were you then? Quite young then? Were you sort of 20s or something?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, 23, 24.
Reminds me of that line from The Thick of It. I could forget, one of the senior civil servants says to his junior, "I'm often out of the conference, and if there are problems, solve those problems."
Exactly. Yes. Well, you have to learn. I mean, it's being chucked in the deep end, isn't it?
I suppose, yeah, absolutely. But what a gamble you took, leaving a secure career in teaching to.
Well, yes, but my subject was Latin, and as you know, it was already disappearing from the syllabus even back then. So I was on a hiding to nothing, really, long term.
How exciting, though! I've talked about this with Amanda that because she took similarly rewarded risks, I think. But a lot of people, such as myself, squirrel themselves away in the public service and, don't take the leap into the professional world. And you say that Latin skills were on the demise. And I think that is very sad, of course, but I think I agree with you. But theatre skills are also very rarefied.
The teaching of Latin was disappearing, but what studying Latin and Greek taught me has stayed with me for life.
Yes.
And I don't just mean doing the crossword. It means actually an ability to analyze and then write, when it was fashionable still to write, instructions that are sensible, logical, understandable, all of those things. And that goes back to the classical education.
Well, you're one of the very few people who will understand my personal motto, then, quantum ille canis est in fenestra, which is it's held me in good stead.
You said it so fast I didn't understand.
Quantum ille canis est in fenestra.
What's that?
How much is that doggy in the window?
Oh God, I got the doggy in the window, but I haven't.
I think it's the motto of St. Custard's in the Molesworth books.
Yes, it sounds like it. Yes.
Yes. No, my actual school motto, talking of Latin, because everything sounds better in Latin, doesn't it? Of course, like French with food, morality and ethics sound much better in Latin. Well, my school motto was Nisi Dominus Frustra. Without God, all is frustration.
or alternatively, don't piss the teachers off.
Yes, that's pretty. Or anybody in senior authority over you. Which college did you go to in Oxford then, Nick?
Trinity.
Oh gosh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about your vicar parent, and I didn't know about Oxford either.
Well, it still is one of the smallest colleges, which was great and beautiful, beautiful setting. Only marred by the physical presence next door of a Victorian monstrosity called Balliol. There was a long rivalry between the two institutions.
Yeah. Trinity is very famous, of course, isn't it? A lot of very famous people have studied there,
including our current Prime Minister.
I gather. Of course, you and he would have just missed each other.
Oh, by some margin.
By a year or two.
By quite a few. In fact, I'd actually left the Playhouse even before he arrived.
Yeah, so very rarefied. Were you not tempted by the academic life there? Because it must be very...
No. It's, how can I describe it? Too parochial. There's something about theatre, particularly where, as a producing house, every 3-4 weeks you've got a new show, new cast, new product to sell. There's constant movement, change, challenge. And if you're a receiving house, and I've run both, it's actually every week you've got a new show, a new cast, a new product to sell. So you have no time to slip into a rut. So it keeps the old grey cells working.
I'm sure it does. So what's the range of theatres? Did you deliberately, I don't suppose you do kind of plan a theatrical career
there may be those who have, but not me.
No.
I stayed at Oxford Playhouse largely because Elizabeth Sweeting, this amazing woman, was also seconded to the Arts Council in Australia for a couple of spells, and I stepped up to the plate while she was away. But then after 6 years, I went to a very different sort of theatre, the Redgrave Theatre in Farnham, which had just been opened, little 300-seater theatre, which was still producing a new play every 3 weeks, right the way around the clock, year round, and was selling every single seat. I mean, Farnham audiences were such that if you announced an Agatha Christie, you could guarantee that the Wednesday and Saturday matinees would sell out first, followed by all the other evenings. Then the director, bless him, decided just to push the boat out a little bit from the shore. Now we're talking mid-1970s.
Okay.
By which time Tom Stoppard had gained some reputation as a playwright. So he decided to do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, his first major work, successful work. And the audience was shocked. They stayed away. We don't know it, therefore we don't like it. So it wasn't all plain sailing. So trying to educate the palate was difficult.
What do people like then? Agatha Christie, that's
Oh, Aigbourn, Christie,
okay.
Durbridge, Shaw. We could go. We could do Shakespeare, but anything of the later 20th century, forget it.
Isn't that interesting? In the 70s, one thinks of the 70s as being quite a sort of, well,
But the average age of that audience was scary.
yeah.
Sort of audience, you watch them come in and you pray God the fire alarm won't go off.
Have a stretcher standing by.
Exactly. Yes.
Stretcher and some of it. But we say this, but of course, this is the generation to which we both of us probably now belong. Or you're thinking even older than that, because that age group has always been very attracted to theatre, but retired people often are, because the cliche is still true. I think that retired people have more time and possibly even these days more money, because you look at or just bringing ourselves to the present, for the audiences that certainly that we attract in Stratford on the amateur stage are demographically, of that age, aren't they? Really?
Yes.
Our age, 60 plus, I suppose. I don't know whether anyone's done any research on the age of these things, but
well, given that Second Thoughts offers a concessionary ticket price, you can very quickly look at the ticket sales and gain some sort of impression. I appreciate some will either because they wish to give us more money, or they're too proud to own up to their age, will pay the full whack.
And a lot of people are, aren't they? A lot of people over a concession age are very proud about not receiving any kind of handout. So, but that also makes for an extremely knowledgeable audience, doesn't it? And a very, I think any audience that takes themselves to live theatre is one is grateful, that they've bothered. People who party with money and come out of the house to see something, particularly of that age group, they've seen a lot, not only of theatre but of life.
Yes. As soon as you go on stage, you are taking on a responsibility. Goes two ways. One is to the audience, as you've just said, and the other is to the playwright. That's what makes it so exciting. And if I say dangerous, I don't mean physically, but there is something edgy about it.
There really is, and that's one of the things, isn't it? That's completely. You can't. If you and I make a mistake during this, I can just edit it out. But of course, if you're live on stage, that's it, mate. The mistake.
Like the early days of television, when Z-Cars went out live.
Yes, it did. And Play for Today was live, wasn't it? Play for Today was live theatre. I think the Archer, all radio was live. A lot of radio was live, wasn't it?
Yes. But that's what I find so wonderful about theatre, because it's a mystical, almost a religious experience. You've got, I describe them as the holy trinity of A's. Actors, author, audience. We all have our role within that. We're all indispensable if it's going to work. And yes, there's a sort of mutual trust as well as dependency.
Yes.
To make the performance work.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's very, because one reads that theatre, in this country had a lot of its origins were in the church, weren't they? And it sort of spilled out from the church. And certainly very high church ceremonies have precisely that trinity, don't they, as well?
Yes. Now, if I can just digress for a moment, my father was horrified when I changed from teaching to theatre. Now, I tried to explain that actually there was a connection between what he did and I did. He would never wear it.
No.
When I was working at the Playhouse, when I first made that change, when his clerical colleagues said, tell me about it. What's your boy doing these days? He would actually weasel out of it, say, oh, he's working for Oxford University.
Which is true, not weaseling out of anything.
Technically true, but
it turned out to be true.
It was a weasel.
Isn't that interesting? I wonder if that's changed now. I know you're very proud of Amy and so on and what she's achieved.
Oh, but, yes.
But do you...
and her potential yet still to achieve.
Indeed. But theatre, yes, I think that's right. I think my dad was actually the same. I was never in it professionally, but my dad was very had mixed feelings about what we call amateur theatre, which I tend to prefer calling public theatre, because amateur is that's a very negative association.
If you study the employment rate of equity members, they can only be in it for the love.
Absolutely.
And that is what amateur means.
Yes, it does, but it has acquired this horrible connotation, though, doesn't it? You see, if somebody cocks up, home decor or something in everyday life, you say, "What an amateur job!" Or so, and it's used as an insult, isn't it? How amateurish! Which is very unfortunate.
It is a really damning phrase.
What is, sorry?
Amdram.
Yes, isn't it? Really is.
And yet, some of the achievements with minimal technical resources are astonishing.
Completely. I was talking to Nic Walsh about this a while ago in the last podcast, actually, with Pam, and he was saying that some of the best theatre he's ever seen was at Playbox. Yes. I agree with that. Now, of course, that is professionally run, but it's it's children.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've always tried to do is to bring what I've learned from professional theatre, and certainly as it were, the management, the organisation, into any non-professional show that I'm involved with. I think that's the least I can do. Whether I succeed or not is another matter. But
coming back to second thoughts, then your chairpersonship of this. Well, I think can I be so bold as to say chairman?
It doesn't worry me, but I'm horrendously politically incorrect at times.
Oh, I think both my listeners are very comfortable with that, Nick. Yes, no. Well, anyway, but what's your level of optimism? You're a very optimistic chap, I think. I've never known you're an absolute. Needs to be said on the record, really. But you're an absolute pleasure to have on a production in any capacity, and you've both worked, done the technical side of things when I've been involved, and also directed. And you're an absolute pleasure because you're so optimistic and buoyant, and it must be absolutely awful. I know how it is when you direct things and you're let's say 3 weeks out.
It's the swan image underneath.
Swan, yes. It's essential for a director, though, isn't it? Don't you think?
Yes. Yeah. The strategic loss of temper at a certain point in the rehearsal cycle is permitted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I've not seen that from you. You didn't do that in. Did you do that in the chorus? Actually, the chorus is behind me. Let me just lift my screen a bit here. There it is. There's chorus.
Yeah.
On the wall.
No, I don't think I did.
No, you didn't.
But sorry, I diverted you. You were talking about second thoughts.
Well, no, yes. So that I suppose my point of saying that was that no doubt you have an optimistic view of what is likely, that how second thoughts are going to fare, going forward. There's no reason why not. In fact, it should be an even more exciting time. Do you think?
Well, we've already talked about Georgie becoming deputy chair. Now, that is an exciting and positive direction. And the work that Amanda did with Rogues and Vagabonds, the youth music theatre group, in bringing on young talent, and quite a number of our Second Thoughts young members started with Rogues and Vagabonds. Now, that is a huge big hope for the future.
Definitely.
Because otherwise, us old farts are going to sort of do less and less, and the whole thing will stagnate. But with the young people there, the next generation, sort of pushing and shoving us and getting us out of the way because they want their turn. Yes, right.
And let's also, since we're talking young people and talking chorus of disapproval, let's also, if we may, without being too maudlin about it, record our sadness about young Ollie, and
yes,
we both
that was a great loss. He was a lovely boy. Yeah,
absolutely, wasn't he? Absolutely delightful, funny. Yeah. I didn't know him very well, but in that production I knew him. That's the only time I did know him. But he was so, we didn't cross much on the stage either. But he was so optimistic himself and had such a great aura of friendliness and warmth and indefatigability. And he very like you, actually, Nick. He had a very kind of positive and driven, yet driven manner.
Yeah. He has had a better singing voice than I ever had.
Now I didn't know. That's another new thing. And by the way, before we finish, we've got to get into the army as well, because not many people may know, because I discovered during something or other that you have an army background. Let's go there now then. Tell us about your military career there, Nick.
Well,
if you can.
Yeah, no. I don't think any knowledge I have is of any interest to anybody now. But at uni, I actually divided my, if I say spare time, it actually should have been the time I should have studied. But hey, who's two ways. One was theatre. That's the obvious one, the one you already knew about. The other one, I joined the officers, the officers training corps. And being the sort of guy I am, I joined the armoured corps section because they had ferret armoured cars that we could drive around the Oxfordshire countryside. Which I was sharing the time that I should have been studying two ways, one theatre, the other the army. And after uni, I joined a little-known part of the British Army called the Royal Armoured Corps Pool of Officers, which was largely ex-short service commission officers and then the odd TA guy like me. And we acted as a sort of emergency reserve for regular regiments. So there I was, age whatever, 22, 23, suddenly in the uniform of a hussar. I mean, I don't mean the full dress, but I was attached to the 13th, 18th Royal Hussars. And for the next 12, 15 years, I would spend 3 weeks every year in uniform, usually on a big field training exercise, either leading a troop of tanks or later on a reconnaissance troop, or later still a slightly less energetic role as a watchkeeper in brigade headquarters. Absolutely fascinating. Largely a different mindset, but the discipline and the requirement to assess a situation and turn that assessment into a set of orders, instructions for other people, was actually an exercise that has proved invaluable ever since. Think how many occasions and in theatre or just your own personal life where you have to do that. It's a technique there's no magic about it, but it's a discipline that is very, very helpful.
Yes, I suspect it is. My only brush with the military has been in the RAF cadets when I was at school, but I never rose to rank, nor continued with it to your level.
One of a group of people I met, which I would never otherwise have met, were expatriate Polish drivers of the big Antar tank transporters. And they'd stayed as a very odd sort of little sub-department in the British Army ever since 1945.
Oh, right, yeah.
And their knowledge and experience and their their history was absolutely fascinating. So on a couple of occasions, I was lucky enough to be invited into their mess to share a beer with them out on exercise. And just as they were sitting at their feet listening, I learned more about immediate post-war Europe than anywhere else.
Gosh, when is this then? The 60s we're talking about?
This would be the very end of the 60s, early 70s.
And then the Polish troops were based here.
Well, they obviously came over during the war and served with the Allied forces, and somehow enough of them managed to stay together, I suspect in Germany, because all those big exercises were held in Germany, and became a sort of small Polish community within Germany, and as part of BAOR. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Totally anomalous, totally unpublicized, but very real.
I think there's a lot of. I won't bore people with the full thing, but of course Monte Cassino was the major land engagement that the Polish army, having been liberated from Russia, they then went on to fight in all kinds of places. But Monte Cassino was the big loss. It was a victory, but in terms of loss of life. But I think also the Polish army were involved in post-war operations in liberated Holland and Belgium, I think.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I think it was possibly, and because I've just been writing some pieces about this, and I think there were some references to Polish armor, or rather, Polish military using armor at any rate.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, the Air Force was very heavily reliant on Polish pilots, as we know. But as you say, not many people are aware of the Polish ground forces that took place.
No.
Took on. No. And of course, they weren't allowed in the the VE celebrations, which was very sad.
It's a pretty murky part of British history.
Anyway.
One of several such.
Yes, but let us. Sorry, I took us down there. But yes. So, do you think there are times when I suppose let's count the ways. Let us count the number. So, you've been involved. You've worked professionally on the production side of theatres. By my count, in this conversation, 2 professional theatres. But I suspect that's not the limit.
Well, three and a half.
What was the third?
I spent York Theatre Royal. I was general manager there for 12 years, 13 years.
Wow. You were general manager of the theatre?
Yes.
Good Lord.
And the highlights, well, we did a lot of things that were good, but the one that I still smile with happy memories, we did the British premiere of the musical Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Oh, really?
Which toured over a number of years around this country and Canada, and then went into the West End.
Wow.
And it was quite something sitting in the Prince of Wales in the West End, seeing our show.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we opened at about the same, within a month of Les Mis, and it rather pulled the audiences. Bugger.
But that's a fair size coup for your theatre, though, isn't it? Did you book them, as it were? Is that how it works?
No, we created the production.
Oh,
we had a history, a tradition of doing one musical a year, and gradually, with an amazing director, we built up the scale of it. We did salad days, and then we went to Greece, and then so we increased the sort of the scale of it, the ambition of it, and eventually we said we're going for broke. We've done Jesus Christ Superstar, yeah, fine. We're going to do Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Never been seen on stage in Europe.
Huh.
It had one
How exciting!
Tried out of the States and failed. We took it on and we changed it and did a very clever staging. and it worked. So much so that it sold out the first run. We revived it, and then a commercial management picked it up and toured it, and eventually took it into the West End, and then toured it again.
And what I mean, what was that? So 12, you were there 12 seasons. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
How many shows a year roughly?
Well, in the best times, we would do something like 7 to 10 repertory productions, including an absolute blockbuster of a panto. We set up a panto, in our second or third year there, with a particular dame and a team around him. And that dame has only just retired. His name's Berry Taylor.
Good Lord.
And he became a legend. But basically, the organized chaos and pandemonium and all the rest of it, which is traditional pantomime,
yes,
sort of developed around him.
So I can't do the mathematics on that very easily.
And the other weeks of the year, we brought in touring productions.
Gosh, because you couldn't afford to go dark, I suppose, could you? Really?
We would probably have a bit of time off in the midst of the summer, but then we realized we were missing a trick, and we put on, taking a 12-week summer period, instead of doing 4 3-week productions, we decided that we'd lengthen that and do 3 4-week productions, because with all the visitors coming through, our potential audience was constantly renewing itself. And therefore, we could afford to stretch the run of a play, provided we did mainstream work that visitors would want to see.
Yes. But what a gamble! It's a gamble, of course, at our modest level in the amateur theatre, because we can't afford to lose money show after show after show. But in your world there in York, that's dozens and dozens of livelihoods that are dependent upon the right choice.
The panto was the big earner.
Uh-huh.
Even in my time, the panto produced 70% of the total box office receipts for the year.
Did it really? Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
We were lucky because the Theatre Royal is basically a very late Victorian 4-tier cream cake of a building.
Really?
So it's got stalls, dress circle, upper circle, gallery. Now, for most weekday repertory productions, I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 350 seats, 400 seats in the bottom 2 shelves were adequate.
Yeah.
If you had a success, you would open another shelf.
Uh-huh.
Another shelf. And for panto and tours, we had 900 seats. So it became suddenly viable.
They still are, aren't they? Pantomimes are still in it, but there aren't many of these regional theatres still going. That's at least the common perception. Is your theatre going?
Well, yeah. But pantomime in the wider sense of a Christmas show, it's still happily a tradition that audiences want to see something they can bring their children, grandchildren, whatever, to see. And that is key. And we had a very strong ethos that the pantomime must not be done on the cheap. It is actually, if you think about it, the most important single production of the year, because there is a new audience, children, coming in, and we want that experience to be absolutely magical, so that they force their parents to take them to another pantomime another year, and they in turn will take their children and their grandchildren. So the seed gets sown.
Absolutely. And the love grows in a child's heart that becomes an adult who cannot do without theatre. You hear so many actors, don't you, who say, it was because I went to X show and I saw it and I thought, that's what I've got to do. That's what I've got to do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, there's something about the transport from the here and now to something magical and
Yes.
imaginary.
Yes. Yes.
It's going back to that religious experience.
Yes, it is.
We're all part of this magic circle.
Yes.
That makes the impossible possible.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. That is so true. I can remember feeling that a bit. You know, you can if you're lucky, you get a sense of that in anything really. But during, funny enough, during chorus of disapproval, there was one moment where I was off to the side of the stage, peering over the lighting plot, the fictional lighting plot
yes.
that David has concocted, to the great dismay of the technician. and I wasn't saying anything, but it had obviously to be in character, and John was acting in the center there, and I had this really, really strong sense that, and it's very difficult to describe, really, almost like an out of body experience. Really, and I thought,
yes,
this is quite, this is humanity at its most imaginative. It's the most imaginative and rich human experience, really, that one can be lucky enough to be part of. Well, I suppose, one doesn't want to compare human experiences, but for people, for us who, for whatever reason of chemistry or background or environment or history, have grown up with a love of it, there is nothing more important, really, is there?
Yeah. Can I tell you one story from my first, possibly second Christmas working in professional theatre back at the Oxford Playhouse? And it was quite early on in the performance. And a distraught mother brought an even more distraught young child out, absolutely in tears. And we thought, well, what's happened? Because the Wicked Witch hasn't appeared, or whoever the baddie was. So what's it all about? And eventually the sobs subsided and speech, comprehensible speech returned. Mummy, they've taken the glass away. The child was so used to the distancing effect of the television.
Oh, wow.
But the reality of live theatre had overwhelmed.
Yes, quite startling, isn't it? Quite startling, and it's so reassuring that it has survived. Kira takes part in Playbox, as we mentioned earlier, and there's probably. Do you think that? Let's finish with this. Let's finish with a note of optimism about the future. Let us imagine a world in which we actually do open up on the 21st of June, rather, and Freudian slip, and everything goes as well as we hope, and the resilience of the bear pit looks as if it may well have survived, because things are going to start opening up there, and second thoughts is as we said. So let us finish with what hopes do you have for the next year or so of Second Thoughts and its life in theatre?
One of the strengths of Second Thoughts has been new writing, and I'm hopeful that we will continue to present new writing by, well, ideally our own members or at least local authors, but in some way we can help in the birth of a new dramatic piece. Because I find that a very exciting, healing, it just ticks all the boxes, that experience. I hope we will do a classics, continue to do the classics, because particularly doing them in the round, which looks likely, I think they are presented afresh without any sense of Victorian staging. You're relying on the talent of the actors and the words to create the picture. You don't need painted scenery.
Yes.
In fact, I hate painted scenery.
Yes. Yes.
So in the round, you've got it all, actually.
Yes, I agree.
You're,
completely.
You're exposed and vulnerable.
Yes.
But you've also got the power to entrance.
Yes. Yes. That's lovely.
So
That's lovely.
I think we've got an exciting prospect over the next couple of years if we can just regain our energy. And the trouble is, I think we've all been de-energized by lockdown.
Yeah.
We need to regain our nerve.
Yes.
Collectively as audience, because
Yes.
I think we've been beaten down by propaganda. Going out is wrong. Going out is dangerous.
Yes.
We've got to overcome that.
Other people have. We're not a very sociable nation anyway, are we? As English people have not.
Well, you mean we're the nation of the handshake rather than the hug?
Indeed, we are. Although, speaking gentleman to gentleman, I am looking forward never to going back to the handshake, because we gents tend to use the handshake as a weapon of war. But I know what you mean. So yes, no, that's a lovely picture. A lovely picture, and a final plug then, because we are. I think Second Thoughts are offering something to the One Act Play Festival, I think, and also there is something in August, is there not?
That's right. Well, the long postponed, and I can't even think of the name of it. You have to cut this one in or prompt me.
Shakespeare Review.
No. The One Act Play.
Oh, I don't know what the name of that is. Is it Happy Days, is it?
Happy Days, yes. We will have to edit this.
And
yes,
Angela's play.
Happy Days is going into the Bear Pits One Act Play Festival for a couple of performances, which is great. And over the August bank holiday weekend, we're doing the Shakespeare Review, 2 performances in the Playhouse and 1 in an amphitheatre at Great Arm.
Yes.
It'll probably pour with rain, but with a bit of luck, we will get a performance there.
Well, it probably will. But as you say, but who cares? We never leave the stage. Do you remember The Tempest? We did The Tempest at the back of Hallscroft. You were involved in that, I think, and it did indeed become a tempest, and it added to the joy of theatre.
I hate to say it, but that was the last show I dared act in, and I could never get that speech out, the key one. And the more I thought about it, the deeper the blockage.
You were lovely in that. You were really, really lovely in that. You were very benign, gentle, and a source of solace to the.
So overcome by stage fright as a result of But I'm happy comparing a show or talking to you, but to be responsible for words written by somebody else, particularly if that somebody else happens to be Will Shakespeare.
Yes.
And we're playing in Hallscroft.
Yes.
The house his daughter and son-in-law built.
Yes. Yes.
Ooh,
I'm nervous now. I'll tell you what. All right, Nick. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. I've taken far too much of your time. And it's lovely that your passion and enthusiasm for theatre is going to carry Second Thoughts forward next year, and who knows what beyond.